So you've decided that you want to learn a language, but you don't know which one to learn first. Well, the good news for you is that I've already learnt 3 languages, so I feel qualified to give you my tips and recommendations. What we're going to do in this video is I'm going to start with a few different languages that are definitely contenders for the first language that you should learn, and then we're going to go for an elimination round. So, the first thing I want you to consider is how easy the language is. Now that might sound strange because anyone that wants to learn a language wants a challenge, but I'll tell you the reason why. Learning a language is a lot more than just memorising new words and learning new sounds. The example I like to give to people is, say you wanted to learn to drive, but in order to do so, you also had to learn to become a mechanic. That is what it's like having to learn a new language. So alongside memorising new words, learning new sounds, you have to learn how language works. And that's tough because with our first language, we never do that. So if you want to succeed, I would say for your first language, to make things easier, learn one that's easy for an English speaker. So who are the contenders? Well, seeing as how English is a Germanic language, the first 5 languages I'm going to add to the list are also Germanic languages, and those are Dutch, German, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian. Those languages are incredibly similar to English. If you were to compare 2 texts side by side, you'd be able to identify words just based on spelling. And oftentimes something that's really helpful is the word order can be almost identical to English. The other group of languages that I'm going to add to the list are Latin-based languages. It might surprise you to know that although English is a Germanic language, I think we have something like 60% of our language is based in Latin. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but so we share a huge vocabulary with the Latin-based languages. So the 4 that I've chosen are Portuguese, Spanish, Italian and French. These are also known as the Romance languages, and the one that I've excluded is Romanian. Because of the Slavic influence, it's considerably more difficult. So we've just got those 4. So in total we have 9. So let's go on to the elimination round. So the first thing I want you to think of is usefulness. How useful is that language? Now, I'm not saying that any one language is more useful than another, and I'm not saying that any one language is superior to another. What I mean by usefulness is how much use are you going to get out of that language? So, if we look at those 5 first languages, the Germanic ones, we all know that the people from those countries have a fantastic level of English, particularly the Scandinavians. So the problem that you have is when you go to that country and you open your mouth and you try and speak their language, they will oftentimes just respond to you in English. And that is so frustrating. Even if you persist in trying to speak their language, they'll reply in English. It's so incredibly frustrating. I've had this happen so many times. So if you're going to go to the trouble of learning a new language, you want to get the maximum use out of it possible. So the other thing to consider with the Germanic languages is that outside of those countries, they're not widely spoken. That's particularly true of the Scandinavian languages. So again, you go to the trouble of learning a language, you want to open as many doors as possible. So for that reason, I'm going to take those 5 off the list. So that leads me on then to the next thing of how widespread the languages are. So the remaining 4, we've got Italian, Portuguese, French and Spanish. Major world languages, but there's definitely one that's trailing behind, and that's Italian. Italian total speakers around the world is around 70 million. That's no small number, obviously. But if we compare that to French and Portuguese, which have almost 300 million total speakers, and then again, way out in the lead, Spanish, which has a total of around 600 million speakers, Italian really is trailing behind. The other thing is outside of Italy, with the Vatican City in San Marino, the only country that has Italian as official language is Switzerland. And even then it's a minority language really, compared to the French and German. So again, I'm going to take Italian off the list. Also, the other thing with Italian, people tend to think Italian is fairly easy. It is deceptively difficult when you compare it to, if you compare it to Portuguese and Spanish, it's deceptively difficult. So, for all those reasons, I'm taking Italian off the list. So now we're into the final three. We're left with French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Now, these are actually the three languages that I've learned, and they are definitely pros and cons to learning each one. French does share a wider vocabulary with English than do Portuguese and Spanish, but where it can be difficult with French is listening. French has a lot of small words that contain only one syllable, and they tend to get lost. This happens actually in English. If I say to you, I should not have been, if I say that naturally, I shouldn't have been, I shouldn't have been, you can hear how that gets lost, and for someone that's not a native English speaker, that is really difficult. That tends to happen with French because of all those small words. They tend to get lost. The other thing is that French is a nasal language. So the vowels have nasalization. So the word for good, bon, the word for well, bien. And what happens is, because of that sound, you don't know where one word ends and another word begins. And that just adds to the difficulty of listening, of understanding spoken French. The other thing that's difficult compared to the remaining two is pronunciation. French has a lot of sounds that don't exist in English, and you really do have to nail the sounds. The sounds to the untrained ear can be extremely similar. Sometimes you can't hear that difference, but you do have to nail the sound because you'll end up saying a completely different word. For instance, the word for neck and the word for your bottom, which is actually a swear word for your backside, there's just a tiny difference. So if you get that wrong, if you say that you haven't slept very well and that you've got a stiff neck, but you get it wrong, you're going to get laughed at. So French pronunciation is difficult. Also, it's not a phonetic language, like the other two pretty much are. So there again, when you're first starting out, when you look at a piece of text, you won't know how to say the words to begin with. And that's frustrating, something that could hold you back from carrying on, staying motivated with the language. And that's really what this video is about. What language are you going to be able to stay motivated to learn? The final thing with French is that compared to the other two languages, the French definitely have a better command of the English language. I've travelled quite a bit to France. I even lived there for the best part of a year. If you can't speak the language, you're stuck. If you approach someone on the street, chances are you won't take many people before you can make yourself understood to say something simple and understand what they're saying. Definitely not true of Portuguese and Spanish speakers. So for those reasons, I'm going to take shock horror, I'm going to take French off the list. So we're down to the final, Spanish or Portuguese. Two major world languages, but there's definitely one that edges it for me. So let's look at them both then. You're definitely going to get maximum use out of these languages, as I've just said. Spanish more so. The Spanish-speaking world tends not to have too good a command of the English language, and that's true in Latin America and Spain. Portuguese, different story. In Brazil, pretty poor really, but Portuguese, they're a lot better. You can compare it more to France. You can make yourself understood speaking English in Portugal. I was surprised when I went there a few years back how good their English is, being used to travelling in Spain, to be honest. So that's definitely a case for learning Spanish. Pronunciation in both languages isn't too difficult if we compare it to, say, French. Spanish has a more neutral alphabet than does Portuguese. Portuguese has a lot of sounds that you wouldn't guess just by hearing them. I'm talking about Brazilian Portuguese because that's the one that I learned. So for instance, ch is a T sound, j is a D. You wouldn't be able to guess those. Whereas in Spanish, the sounds are more neutral. I sort of think that the sounds in Portuguese can be sort of a bit wacky. They've also had the nasalization of vowels, so you get that sounds, which I really love. I love Brazilian Portuguese. I love the sound of it, but it can be a bit more tricky to understand. So Spanish is a brilliant one to learn because the alphabet is very simple. Apart from the rolled R, we've pretty much got every sound. There's just sort of variations of the same sound. And so much so, you could speak Spanish, really, with an English, by pronouncing them as we would in English, the letters as we would in English, and you'll be understood. Apart from that rolled R, you're going to be understood, pretty much. Definitely could never do that with French. And that's brilliant. That's something else. I don't particularly enjoy learning new sounds when I learn a new language, so I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people, so that definitely goes in the favour of Spanish. Another thing, Portuguese can be a bit more tricky. Plurals are harder to form in Portuguese. In Spanish it's generally just add es or just s, pretty much. It's very similar to English. The other thing is contractions. So in English you say I don't, so don't, do not, don't becomes one word. There's lots and lots and lots of those in Portuguese, whereas in Spanish there's only really two. If you know them, let me know down below. So again, that makes it a lot easier to learn Spanish. Something I would say in favour of Portuguese, I was surprised when I first started learning the language, how the word order can be incredibly similar to English at times. Not always, but at times it can be extremely similar. It's definitely more tricky in Spanish. Sometimes the word order can be sort of back to front or phrased in a different way. Whereas with Portuguese, I was amazed at how almost word for word, not always, of course, definitely. It does come from a different language family, so it is different, but I was amazed at the similarities at times. So that's one in favour for Portuguese, definitely. So which is it then? Which language should you learn first? Well, if you've seen the name of this channel, you'll get no prizes for guessing that the answer is Spanish. Spanish, I think, should definitely be your first language. Having learned French, Portuguese and Spanish, I can definitely say that Spanish has been the easiest. Obviously, I've had the advantage of learning two languages before having learnt Spanish, but it's definitely a great first language to learn. The similarities at times can be incredible. It opens so many doors. If you want to travel to Latin America, most countries speak Spanish, the big exception really being Brazil. But the great thing is if you learn Spanish, you almost get 2 for 1. I think around 89%, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 89% of the languages are mutually intelligible. So if you take a Portuguese speaker and a Spanish speaker, they can hold a conversation together fairly comfortably, which is great. So if you learn Spanish, you'll get Portuguese anyway. The other great thing, if you live in America, you'll know that there's a huge Hispanic population. I think actually they actually have the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, and it's actually predicted, I read, by 2060 they're going to be the largest Spanish-speaking country on the planet, which is actually incredible. They're going to overtake Mexico. So you'll know how useful Spanish is. It'll look good on your CV, so good job opportunities, and it'll open up whole communities for you, knowing Spanish, which is always nice. Again, because Spanish has that more neutral sound, if you travel to Italy, you're again probably going to be able to make yourself understood fairly easily. If you were to go to Italy as a Portuguese speaker, they probably wouldn't be able to understand you because of those sort of wacky sounds. Probably offending people by saying that, but hope you know what I mean. So Spanish, definitely. It shares an incredible amount of similarities with English. You don't have to nail the pronunciation. You get time. That's the other great thing with Spanish. You get time. to hear the words. That's excellent for keeping you motivated, because it's all well and good that you can read, you can write, and you can sort of get your words out. You can really become downhearted when a native speaker opens their mouth and you can't understand. It makes you want to give up. So go Spanish, definitely. Here on this channel we have a completely free Spanish course. I'd encourage you to check that out. If I have convinced you to learn Spanish, something that you do need to decide is whether to learn European Spanish, so the Spanish from Spain, or Latin American Spanish, and I've done a video on that recently, so I'd encourage you to check that out. It's not as straightforward as you think, so give that a watch. I'll put a link card at the end along with the course here. If you want a further in-depth discussion on whether you should learn Spanish or Italian, Spanish or Portuguese, Spanish or French, I'm going to be making a series of videos on those where I go more in depth. So make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell, as you'll be notified when those videos are made. But now over to you. Do you agree that Spanish should be the first language? What's been your experience? Perhaps you're watching this video and you've already learnt a language. Which language did you decide to learn first? What's been your experience? Did you regret learning a language maybe that wasn't on this list, and you realised how difficult it was? Let me know down below. Also, as of next month, I'm going to be doing a Q&A on the Spanish language. So if you're raring to go and there's anything you want to know, anything to do with the Spanish language or Hispanic culture, leave a comment and you will be included in the monthly Q&A. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd ask you to do this channel a favour and please give me a thumbs up, and also make sure to subscribe, as I have new videos coming out every single week. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.